The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the dusty general store, and Fiona Gardner stepped down into the California sunlight of Willits wearing a borrowed dress and carrying everything she owned in a carpet bag that weighed less than a sack of flour. It was 1878, and she had traveled 3,000 miles to marry a man named Thomas Whitfield, a prosperous rancher who had corresponded with her for 8 months through carefully written letters that promised security, respect, and a life far better than the one she was leaving behind in Philadelphia. But when the stagecoach driver had stopped at the last relay station, he had pulled her aside with his hat in his hands and told her that Thomas Whitfield had been thrown from his horse 2 weeks prior and had died 3 days before she left Pennsylvania. The telegram had arrived too late to stop her journey, and now she stood in a town where she knew no one, with $17 to her name and no ring on her finger to show she had ever been wanted at all. The main street of Willits stretched before her, lined with wooden buildings that looked like they might blow away in a strong wind. She could see a saloon, a blacksmith shop, a hotel that looked questionable at best, and several establishments she could not immediately identify. Mountains rose in the distance, covered with pines and redwoods that seemed to touch the sky. The air smelled of dust, horses, and sawdust from what appeared to be a lumber operation on the edge of town. Fiona was 22 years old, and she had never felt more alone in her entire life. A man approached from across the street, his boots making solid sounds against the packed earth. He was tall, with broad shoulders that spoke of hard work, and he wore a dusty shirt, worn denim trousers, and a hat that had seen better days. His face was tanned from the sun, with lines around his eyes that suggested he spent most of his time outdoors. He looked to be in his late 20s, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes that were such a light brown, they looked almost gold in the afternoon light. "You are Fiona Gardner," he said, and it was not a question. His voice was deep and carried a certainty that made her straighten her spine. "I am," she replied, lifting her chin. "And you are Logan Sullivan. I own the ranch adjacent to what was Thomas Whitfield's property. I am sorry for your loss." He removed his hat, and she noticed that his hair was damp with sweat. He had been working then and had stopped whatever he was doing to come into town. "The stagecoach driver sent word ahead that you were arriving. I wanted to make sure you were not left stranded." "That is kind of you," Fiona said carefully. She did not know this man, and kindness from strangers often came with expectations she was not prepared to meet. "But I can manage on my own." "Can you?" Logan asked, and there was no mockery in his tone, only genuine curiosity. "Do you have family here, friends? A place to stay?" Fiona felt her face grow warm. "I will find something." "The hotel is run by a man named Jasper Cole, and he is not particular about the company he keeps. I would not recommend a woman staying there alone." Logan glanced down the street, then back at her. "Thomas's sister, Margaret, lives on his property. She asked me to bring you out to the ranch if you were willing. She said you could stay there while you figure out what you want to do next." "Why would she want that?" Fiona asked. "She does not know me. Thomas spoke of you often. He showed Margaret your letters. She feels you have been wronged by circumstance and she wants to help." Logan shifted his weight, and Fiona realized he was uncomfortable with this conversation. "It is not charity. Margaret could use the company, and there is plenty of work on a ranch if you are willing to earn your keep." Fiona considered this. She had very few options, and pride would not keep her fed or sheltered. "All right," she said finally. "I will go with you to meet Margaret. But I make no promises beyond that." "Fair enough," Logan said. He took her carpet bag before she could protest and walked toward a wagon that was parked in front of the general store. The wagon was sturdy and well-maintained, pulled by 2 horses that looked strong and healthy. He helped her up onto the seat, and she noticed that his hands were calloused and rough, the hands of a man who worked with them every day. They rode out of town in silence, the wagon creaking beneath them. The road was rough, carved through land that seemed both beautiful and harsh. Fiona could see cattle in the distance, grazing on grass that grew in patches between rocky outcroppings. The mountains loomed larger as they traveled, and she felt very small beneath their gaze. "How long have you lived here?" she asked, breaking the silence. "All my life," Logan replied. "My father brought my mother out here in 1850, when California was barely a state. He was looking for gold like everyone else, but he had the sense to realize that ranching was more reliable than panning for metal that might not exist. He built the Sullivan Ranch from nothing, and when he died 5 years ago, he left it to me. And your mother," Logan's hands tightened on the reins. "She died when I was 16. Fever took her one winter, and there was nothing any of us could do." "I am sorry," Fiona said, and she meant it. She had lost her own mother 3 years ago, and the grief still felt fresh on some days. "Thank you," Logan said quietly. They rode in silence for a while longer, and then he spoke again. "What made you decide to come west? To marry a man you had never met?" Fiona considered how much to tell him. "My father died 2 years ago. He left debts and there was no money. I was working in a textile factory, 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, for wages that barely kept me fed. When Thomas wrote to me, he offered something different, a chance at a better life. I thought it was worth the risk. And now I am here and he is dead, and I have to figure out what comes next." Fiona looked out at the landscape, so different from the crowded streets of Philadelphia. "I am good at figuring things out. I will manage." Logan glanced at her, and she thought she saw something like respect in his eyes. "I believe you will." The Whitfield ranch appeared after another 20 minutes of travel. It was smaller than Fiona had expected, with a house that needed paint and a barn that leaned slightly to one side. The corral fences were in good repair, though, and she could see chickens scratching in the yard. A woman emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron. She was in her early 30s, with brown hair pulled back in a bun and a face that might have been pretty if it were not so careworn. "You must be Fiona," the woman said, coming forward with a smile that seemed genuine. "I am Margaret Whitfield. I am so glad Logan was able to bring you out here." Fiona climbed down from the wagon, accepting Margaret's offered hand. "Thank you for your hospitality. I do not want to be a burden." "You are not a burden," Margaret said firmly. "Thomas would have wanted me to help you, and truth be told, I could use the company. It has been lonely here since he passed." Her eyes grew damp and she blinked quickly. "Please come inside. You must be exhausted from your journey." Logan carried Fiona's bag to the porch and set it down carefully. "I will be heading back to my place then. Margaret, if you need anything, you know where to find me." "Thank you, Logan," Margaret said warmly. "You are a good neighbor." Logan nodded and climbed back onto his wagon. Fiona watched him drive away, something in her chest tightening inexplicably as the wagon disappeared down the road. Margaret led her inside the house, which was small but clean. There were 2 bedrooms, a kitchen with a wood stove, and a sitting area with a fireplace. The furniture was simple but well made, and Fiona could see evidence of a woman's touch in the curtains at the windows and the rag rug on the floor. "You can have Thomas's room," Margaret said, showing her to a bedroom that contained a bed, a washstand, and a trunk. "I hope that does not make you uncomfortable." "No," Fiona said, setting her bag on the bed. "It is generous of you to share your home with me." Margaret smiled sadly. "Thomas was my only family. Our parents died when we were young and we only had each other. He was so excited when you agreed to come. He talked about building a bigger house, about starting a family, about finally having someone to share his life with." She wiped at her eyes. "I am sorry. I do not mean to make this harder for you." "You are not," Fiona assured her. "I am sorry for your loss. I wish I could have met him." Over the next few days, Fiona settled into a routine at the Whitfield ranch. She helped Margaret with the cooking, the cleaning, the chickens, and the garden. She learned how to milk the 2 cows and how to churn butter. She discovered that ranch work was harder than factory work in many ways, but it was also more satisfying. At the end of each day, she could see what she had accomplished, and that meant something. Logan came by every few days, ostensibly to check on Margaret, but always finding reasons to stay and help with the heavier work. He fixed the barn door that had been hanging crooked, repaired a section of fence that had rotted through, and helped move hay into the barn for the winter that was still months away. Fiona found herself watching for his arrival, and she told herself it was only because he was helpful, not because something about his steady presence made her feel safer than she had in years. One afternoon, about 2 weeks after her arrival, Logan arrived with a young steer that had wandered onto his property. "I think this one belongs to you," he said to Margaret, dismounting from his horse. "It has Thomas's brand." "Oh, thank goodness," Margaret said, coming out of the house. "We have been missing that one for 3 days. How did it get all the way to your place?" "Broke through a fence on the eastern pasture. I will ride out and fix it for you tomorrow if you like." "You do not have to do that," Margaret protested. "You have your own ranch to run." "It is no trouble," Logan said, and his eyes flicked to Fiona, who was standing in the doorway. "I do not mind helping." Margaret caught the look and smiled knowingly. "Well, if you insist. Would you like to stay for supper? Fiona made a stew and there is plenty." Logan hesitated, and Fiona found herself hoping he would say yes. "If it is not an imposition." "Not at all," Fiona said quickly, then felt her face warm at her eagerness. "I mean, you are welcome to join us." Supper was a comfortable affair, with Margaret telling stories about Thomas as a boy and Logan adding his own memories of growing up in the area. Fiona learned that the 2 ranches had been neighbors for nearly 30 years, and that Logan and Thomas had been friends despite the age difference between them. She learned that Logan had briefly considered leaving California to seek his fortune elsewhere, but had decided that the ranch was where he belonged. She learned that he loved horses, that he had a dog named Buck who was currently guarding his property, and that he had a quiet sense of humor that snuck up on her when she least expected it. After supper, Logan helped clear the dishes despite Margaret's protests. Fiona washed while he dried, and they worked in companionable silence. His arm brushed against hers once, and she felt a jolt of awareness that made her nearly drop the plate she was holding. "I should be going," Logan said when the last dish was put away. "It will be dark soon." "Thank you for your help today," Margaret said, walking him to the door, "and for returning our steer." "Anytime," Logan said. He looked at Fiona again, and there was something in his expression that made her heart beat faster. "Good night, Miss Gardner." "Good night, Mr. Sullivan," she replied, and she watched through the window as he rode away into the gathering dusk. Margaret came to stand beside her, a knowing smile on her face. "He is a good man." "He seems to be," Fiona said carefully. "He lost his father to a ranching accident and his mother to fever. He has been alone for a long time, running that ranch by himself with only seasonal help. He deserves someone to care for him." Margaret glanced at Fiona. "And you deserve someone who will care for you." "I barely know him," Fiona protested. "Then get to know him," Margaret said simply. "You are not promised to anyone now, Fiona. You are free to choose your own path." Fiona thought about that as she lay in bed that night. Margaret was right. She had come west to marry Thomas Whitfield, but Thomas was gone. She could return to Philadelphia, back to the factory and the life she had left behind. Or she could stay here in this wild and beautiful place and see what might grow if she gave it a chance. The next morning, Logan arrived early to ride out and repair the fence. Fiona packed him a lunch without being asked, and when she handed it to him, their fingers brushed and neither of them pulled away immediately. "Thank you," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "You did not have to do that." "I wanted to," Fiona replied, meeting his eyes. He held her gaze for a long moment, and she felt something pass between them, something fragile and new and full of possibility. Then he nodded, mounted his horse and rode off toward the eastern pasture. Fiona watched him go, her hand pressed against her chest where her heart was beating too fast. Margaret came to stand beside her, saying nothing, but the smile on her face spoke volumes. Over the following weeks, Logan found more and more reasons to visit the Whitfield ranch. He helped Margaret and Fiona with tasks that needed a man's strength, but he also lingered afterward, talking with them over coffee or staying for meals. Fiona found herself looking forward to his visits with an intensity that both thrilled and frightened her. She had come west to marry Thomas Whitfield out of necessity, but what she was beginning to feel for Logan Sullivan was something else entirely. One evening, Logan arrived just as the sun was setting, his hat in his hands, and a nervous expression on his face that Fiona had never seen before. "Miss Gardner," he said formally, "would you care to take a walk with me?" Fiona looked at Margaret, who made a shooing motion with her hands. "Go on. The dishes can wait." They walked away from the house, toward a grove of trees that marked the boundary between the two properties. The air was cooling as the sun disappeared behind the mountains, and Fiona wrapped her shawl more tightly around her shoulders. "I want to be honest with you," Logan said after they had walked in silence for a few minutes. "I have been thinking about you constantly since the day you arrived. I know that is not appropriate given the circumstances, but I cannot seem to help myself." Fiona's breath caught in her throat. "Logan, let me finish," he said, stopping and turning to face her. "You came here to marry Thomas, and I respected him. I would never have tried to interfere with that. But he is gone, and you are here, and every time I see you I want to ask you to stay, not just for a few weeks or months, but permanently." "What are you saying?" Fiona whispered, even though she thought she knew. Logan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object. In the fading light, Fiona could see that it was a ring, simple and gold, with a small stone that caught the last rays of the sun. "This was my mother's wedding ring," Logan said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "My father gave it to her when they married, and she wore it every day until she died. Before she passed, she gave it to me and told me to keep it for the woman I would someday love." He took a breath. "I know we have not known each other long. I know you might think I am rushing things. But I also know that sometimes you meet someone and you just know. I know, Fiona, you are the woman my mother wanted me to find." Fiona felt tears prick her eyes. "We have only known each other for a few weeks." "That is true," Logan acknowledged, "but I have seen how hard you work. I have seen how kind you are to Margaret. I have seen your strength and your courage and your determination. I have seen enough to know that I want to spend the rest of my life seeing more." "I do not have anything to offer you," Fiona said, her voice breaking. "No dowry, no family, no connections. Just myself. That is all I want," Logan said simply. He stepped closer, so close that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "I am not asking you to marry me tomorrow. I am asking you to give me a chance, to let me court you properly. To see if what I feel might be something you could feel too." Fiona looked up at him, this man who had shown her nothing but kindness and respect, who had helped her when he had no obligation to do so, who was offering her not just security but the possibility of something she had never expected to find: love. "Yes," she said, and the word came out stronger than she expected. "Yes, I will let you court me, and Logan, Yes, I think I already feel it too, she admitted, feeling her face flush. I have been trying not to because it seemed wrong somehow, but I cannot help it. When you are near, everything feels right in a way it never has before. Logan's face transformed, his usual serious expression giving way to a smile so bright it made her breath catch. "May I kiss you?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Yes," Fiona whispered, and then his hands were cupping her face, gentle despite their calluses, and his lips were on hers, warm and sure and perfect. The kiss was everything Fiona had never known she wanted. It was tender and passionate and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard, and Logan rested his forehead against hers. "I am going to marry you," he said with certainty. "Maybe not tomorrow or next week, but soon. I am going to make you my wife, Fiona Gardner, and I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me." "I believe you," Fiona said, and she did. They walked back to the house hand in hand, and when Margaret saw them, her face lit up with joy. "I knew it," she said, pulling Fiona into a hug. "I knew from the first day that you two were meant for each other." "We are taking things slowly," Fiona said, but she could not stop smiling. "Of course you are," Margaret agreed, winking at Logan. "But slowly or not, I expect I will be dancing at your wedding before the year is out." She was right. Logan courted Fiona with a determination and tenderness that took her breath away. He brought her wildflowers from the meadow near his ranch. He taught her to ride a horse, patient and encouraging as she learned. He told her stories about his parents and his childhood, and she told him about hers. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, and Fiona discovered that she could be herself with him in a way she had never been with anyone else. 6 weeks after that first kiss, Logan came to the ranch in the middle of the day, which was unusual for him. He asked Margaret if he could speak to Fiona alone, and Margaret gave her blessing with tears in her eyes. Logan took Fiona out to the grove of trees where they had first kissed, and there, with the California sun shining down on them and the mountains standing witness, he got down on one knee. "Fiona Gardner," he said, pulling out his mother's ring once more. "I know we agreed to take things slowly, but I cannot wait any longer. I love you. I love your strength and your kindness and the way you make me laugh even when I am tired and sore from a long day. I love the way you hum while you work, and the way you look at the mountains like they are the most beautiful thing you have ever seen. I love everything about you, and I want to spend the rest of my life loving you more. Will you marry me?" Fiona dropped to her knees in front of him, not caring that the ground was hard and dusty. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "Yes, Logan, I will marry you. I love you too. I think I started loving you the first day, when you came to meet the stagecoach and made sure I was not left alone. You have shown me what it means to be truly cared for, and I want nothing more than to spend my life with you." Logan slid the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her all along. Then he was pulling her into his arms and kissing her, and Fiona felt like her heart might burst from the joy of it. They were married 3 weeks later in a small ceremony in Willits. Margaret stood beside Fiona, and Logan's ranch foreman, a gruff man named Henry who had worked for Logan's father, stood beside Logan. The ceremony was performed by a traveling preacher who happened to be passing through town, and afterward, they had a celebration at the saloon that the owner graciously cleared out for the occasion. It seemed like the whole town turned out to wish them well, and Fiona was overwhelmed by the kindness of these people who had been strangers just weeks before. That night, Logan brought her to the Sullivan Ranch, which would now be her home. The house was larger than the Whitfield place, with 3 bedrooms and a wide porch that looked out over the pastures. Inside, Fiona could see evidence of Logan's attempts to prepare for her arrival. Fresh curtains in the windows, a new rug in the sitting room, wildflowers in a vase on the table. "I want you to change anything you like," Logan said, watching her nervously. "I want this to feel like your home, not just mine." Fiona turned to him, her heart so full she thought it might overflow. "It already does," she said, "because you are here." Logan swept her into his arms, carrying her across the threshold as she laughed. He carried her to the bedroom, and there, in the soft glow of lamplight, they came together as husband and wife. It was tender and passionate, and everything Fiona had hoped for, and when it was over, she lay in Logan's arms and felt truly at peace for the first time in years. "I cannot believe you are mine," Logan whispered into her hair. "I keep thinking I am going to wake up and find this was all a dream." "It is real," Fiona assured him, pressing a kiss to his chest. "I am here and I am yours and I am not going anywhere." They fell into a rhythm over the following months. Fiona learned the ways of the ranch, helping Logan with the cattle and the horses. She discovered she had a gift for training the younger horses, patient and gentle in a way that won their trust. Logan taught her to rope and brand, though he insisted she stay clear of the more dangerous work. They worked side by side during the day and fell into each other's arms at night, and Fiona had never been happier. Margaret visited often, and Fiona made sure to visit her just as frequently. The older woman had become like a sister to her, and Fiona worried about her living alone at the Whitfield ranch. One evening, over dinner, Fiona broached a subject she had been thinking about for weeks. "Margaret," she said carefully, "have you ever thought about selling the Whitfield ranch?" Margaret looked up from her plate, surprised. "I have thought about it," she admitted, "but I do not know where I would go. That ranch is all I have left of Thomas." "What if you did not have to leave?" Fiona suggested. "What if Logan bought the property and you stayed on to help run it? We could combine the two ranches, make them stronger together, and you would not be alone anymore." Logan reached over and squeezed Fiona's hand, pride evident in his eyes. "I think that is a wonderful idea," he said. "We could build you a small house on the property, something that would be yours. You could have your independence but still be close enough that we could help each other." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "You would do that for me. You gave me a home when I had nowhere to go," Fiona said firmly. "You helped me when you had no reason to. Let us help you now." And so it was arranged. Logan bought the Whitfield property for a fair price, and they spent the winter building Margaret a small house halfway between the two main houses. By spring, the Sullivan ranch had doubled in size, and Margaret was settled into her new home, happy to have family nearby and purpose in helping manage the expanded operation. As the seasons passed, Fiona's happiness only grew. She loved the work, challenging as it was. She loved the land, harsh and beautiful in equal measure. Most of all, she loved Logan, whose quiet strength and unwavering devotion made every day feel like a gift. In the spring of 1880, nearly 2 years after she had arrived in Willits, Fiona discovered she was pregnant. She told Logan on a warm evening in May, as they sat together on the porch watching the sun set behind the mountains. "I have news," she said, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby." Logan's eyes widened, and then he was pulling her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "Fiona," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Are you sure?" "I am sure," she said, laughing through her tears. "The doctor in town confirmed it yesterday when I went to pick up supplies. We are going to be parents, Logan." Logan pulled back to look at her, his eyes shining. "I am going to be a father," he said, as if testing the words. Then he laughed, the sound so full of joy that it made Fiona's heart soar. "We are going to have a baby." He insisted she rest more, worried that she was working too hard. Fiona humored him for a while, but by her second trimester, she was feeling strong and energetic, and she refused to be treated like an invalid. She continued to help with the ranch work, though she avoided the heaviest tasks. Margaret clucked over her like a mother hen, making sure she ate enough and rested when she needed to. Their son was born on a cold January morning in 1881, coming into the world with a loud cry that announced his presence to everyone within earshot. Logan was there for the birth, holding Fiona's hand and whispering encouragement, and when the baby was finally placed in his arms, the look on his face was something Fiona would remember for the rest of her life. "He is perfect," Logan said, his voice breaking. "Fiona, he is perfect." They named him Lucas Samuel Sullivan, and he had his father's dark hair and his mother's green eyes. He was a healthy, happy baby, and both Logan and Fiona were utterly besotted with him. Margaret visited daily, helping with the baby and giving Fiona advice that she had learned from raising Thomas. Lucas was 6 months old when disaster struck. A group of cattle rustlers hit the ranch one night, making off with nearly 50 head of cattle. Logan was furious, not just at the loss, but at the violation of having criminals on his land, so close to his family. "I am going after them," he announced the next morning, already preparing his horse and checking his rifle. "No," Fiona said firmly, "you are not going alone." "I will take Henry and some of the other men," Logan assured her. "We will get our cattle back. And what if something happens to you?" Fiona demanded, her voice rising. "What if you are shot or injured or killed? What about Lucas? What about me?" Logan pulled her into his arms, and she could feel him trembling with anger and frustration. "I cannot let them get away with this, Fiona. If I do, they will think we are easy targets and they will come back. I have to show them that the Sullivan Ranch is not to be trifled with." "Then let the law handle it," Fiona pleaded. "Send word to the marshal. The nearest marshal is 3 days away, and by then the trail will be cold." "I am sorry, Fiona, but I have to do this." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "I will come back to you. I promise." Fiona watched him ride away with Henry and 3 other ranch hands, her heart in her throat. She spent the next 2 days in a state of anxiety, barely able to eat or sleep. Lucas sensed her distress and was fussier than usual, and only Margaret's calming presence kept Fiona from falling apart completely. On the 3rd day, Logan returned, dusty and exhausted but unharmed. They had tracked the rustlers to a canyon 20 miles south and had confronted them. There had been a tense standoff, but ultimately the rustlers had backed down when they realized they were outnumbered. Logan and his men had recovered all but 5 of the stolen cattle, and the rustlers had fled further south, hopefully never to return. Fiona ran to him as he dismounted, and he caught her in his arms, holding her so tightly it almost hurt. "I am sorry," he murmured into her hair. "I am sorry I worried you, but I am home now and I am safe." "Do not ever do that to me again," Fiona said fiercely, pulling back to look at him. "You are a husband and a father now, Logan Sullivan. You cannot take risks like that." "I know," Logan said, cupping her face in his hands. "You are right. From now on, we will handle things differently. I will send for the marshal next time, or I will hire more men to help protect the ranch. But I will not leave you like that again. I promise." And he kept that promise. Over the next few years, Logan built the Sullivan Ranch into one of the most successful operations in the region. He hired more men, built better fences, and developed a reputation as a fair but firm employer. Fiona worked beside him, her contributions just as valuable as his. She kept the books, managed the household, and continued to train horses, which became a lucrative side business. Lucas grew into a bright, energetic boy who loved the ranch and everything about it. He followed his father everywhere. asking endless questions and learning everything he could about cattle and horses and the land. In 1883, Fiona gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Lily Margaret Sullivan, after the flowers Fiona loved and the woman who had helped make their family possible. Margaret wept when they told her the baby's name, and she doted on her namesake with the same devotion she showed Lucas. The years passed in a blur of hard work and happiness. Lucas grew tall and strong, taking on more responsibility on the ranch as he got older. Lily was a spirited child who had her mother's determination and her father's stubbornness, a combination that kept Fiona and Logan on their toes. In 1886, Fiona gave birth to their third child, another son they named Samuel, after Logan's father. By 1890, the Sullivan Ranch was one of the largest in Northern California. Lucas was 9 years old and already an accomplished rider. Lily was 7 and could rope a calf with surprising accuracy. Samuel was 4 and following in his siblings' footsteps. Margaret was still a vital part of their lives, helping with the children and the ranch, a beloved member of their extended family. One evening in late summer, Fiona and Logan sat on the porch as they had done so many times before, watching their children play in the yard. Lucas was teaching Lily how to throw a lasso while Samuel chased butterflies, his laughter ringing out across the ranch. "You ever think about that day you arrived in Willits?" Logan asked, taking Fiona's hand in his. "When you stepped off that stagecoach with nothing but a carpet bag and $17. I think about it often," Fiona admitted. "I was so scared and so lost. I had no idea what I was going to do." "I am glad you stayed," Logan said, raising her hand to his lips and kissing her knuckles. "I am glad you gave me a chance." Fiona looked at the ring on her finger, Logan's mother's ring that had fit so perfectly it seemed meant for her. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the grief and uncertainty that had led to joy and belonging. She thought about Thomas Whitfield, who she had never met but who had inadvertently given her the greatest gift of her life by bringing her to this place, to this man. "I am glad too," she said softly. "I came here to be a bride, but I had no ring to show for it. Then you gave me your mother's ring and made me your wife, and you gave me a life I never dreamed was possible." Logan pulled her close, and she rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her cheek. "I love you, Fiona Sullivan," he said. "I loved you from the moment I saw you step off that stagecoach, looking so brave and so vulnerable at the same time. I will love you until the day I die and beyond." "And I love you," Fiona replied, tears of happiness sliding down her cheeks. "You are my home, Logan. You and our children and this ranch. You are everything I never knew I needed." They sat together as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. Their children's laughter filled the air, and in the distance, cattle lowed in the pastures. It was a simple moment, but it was perfect, and Fiona knew she would remember it for the rest of her life. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new challenges and new joys. Lucas grew into a fine young man, eventually taking over much of the day-to-day management of the ranch. He married a local girl named Sarah when he was 22, and they built a house on the property and started their own family. Lily became an accomplished horsewoman, eventually starting a business training horses for wealthy clients throughout California. Samuel showed an aptitude for business and helped expand the ranch's reach, establishing contracts with buyers as far away as San Francisco. Margaret lived to see all 3 children grown and married, surrounded by the family she had helped create. She passed away peacefully in her sleep in 1895, at the age of 52, and she was buried on the ranch she had loved, next to her brother Thomas. Fiona and Logan grieved her loss deeply, but they took comfort in knowing that she had spent her final years happy and loved. As Fiona and Logan grew older, they gradually stepped back from the day-to-day operations of the ranch, trusting their children to carry on the legacy they had built. They spent their days working in the garden, riding out to their favorite spots on the property, and playing with their grandchildren, of which there were eventually 12. On a warm summer evening in 1910, Fiona and Logan celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary. The whole family gathered at the ranch for a party that lasted well into the night. There was food and music and dancing, and Fiona felt overwhelmed by the love that surrounded her. This family, this life, had all grown from a moment of faith, from a decision to stay and see what might be possible. As the party wound down and the grandchildren were carried off to bed by their parents, Fiona and Logan slipped away to their favorite spot, a small hill that overlooked the entire ranch. They sat together in the grass, holding hands as they had done countless times before. 30 years, Logan mused, shaking his head in wonder. It does not seem possible that so much time has passed. The best 30 years of my life, Fiona said, squeezing his hand. Every single day with you has been a gift. Logan turned to look at her, and even after all these years, the love in his eyes still made her breath catch. His hair was silver now, and there were deep lines around his eyes and mouth, but to Fiona, he was just as handsome as he had been the day she met him. "Do you remember what I said to you the first time I put this ring on your finger?" Logan asked, touching the ring that she had worn every day for 30 years. "You said that I was the woman your mother wanted you to find," Fiona replied. "You said you wanted to spend the rest of your life with me." "I also said something else," Logan reminded her. "Do you remember?" Fiona thought back, and then she smiled as the memory surfaced. "You said I did not have anything to offer but myself, and I said that was all you wanted." "That is right," Logan said. "And I meant it then, and I mean it now. You were all I wanted, Fiona. Everything else, the children, the ranch, the life we built together, it was all just a bonus. You were always enough, just as you were." Fiona felt tears slip down her cheeks, but they were happy tears. "And you were all I needed. When I stepped off that stagecoach, I thought I had lost everything, but I had actually found everything. I just did not know it yet." They sat together as the stars came out, one by one, filling the sky with light. In the distance, they could hear the sounds of their family, their legacy, preparing for bed in the houses scattered across the ranch. It was a legacy built on love and hard work and faith in each other. "Thank you," Fiona whispered. "Thank you for seeing me that day. Thank you for not letting me face the world alone. Thank you for loving me." "Thank you for staying," Logan replied. "Thank you for giving me a chance. Thank you for building this life with me." They kissed under the stars, a sweet and tender kiss that held 30 years of love and commitment and partnership. When they finally pulled apart, they sat in comfortable silence, knowing that words were not always necessary when two hearts understood each other so completely. As they grew older still, Fiona and Logan remained devoted to each other. They were rarely seen apart, always holding hands, always finding reasons to touch and connect. Their children marveled at the strength of their bond, and their grandchildren grew up understanding what true love looked like, because they saw it demonstrated every day in the way their grandparents treated each other. Logan passed away in 1918 at the age of 68 on a warm spring morning with Fiona holding his hand. He had been ill for several months, and though Fiona had prayed for more time, she knew that he was tired and ready to rest. His last words to her were, "I will wait for you, my love. Take your time, but when you are ready, I will be there." Fiona grieved him deeply, but she did not fall apart. She had their children and grandchildren around her, and she had the ranch, which was now a sprawling operation that employed dozens of people and encompassed thousands of acres. She spent her final years telling stories about Logan to anyone who would listen, making sure that everyone knew what kind of man he had been, how much he had loved his family, and how he had built something lasting from nothing but hard work and determination. Fiona passed away in 1922 at the age of 66, surrounded by her children and grandchildren. Her last words were a smile and a whisper of Logan's name. She was buried next to him on the hill they had loved, overlooking the ranch they had built together. Their graves were marked with simple headstones that read Logan Sullivan, 1850–1918. Beloved husband, father, grandfather, he built a legacy of love. Fiona Gardner Sullivan, 1856–1922. Beloved wife, mother, grandmother, she came west with nothing and found everything. The Sullivan Ranch continued to thrive for generations, passed down through Lucas and his descendants. The story of how Logan and Fiona met became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. It was a story about faith and courage, about taking chances and building something meaningful from the ashes of disappointment. It was a story about a woman who stepped off a stagecoach with no ring on her finger, and a man who slid his mother's ring onto that finger and said, "Now you do." It was a love story, pure and simple, and it endured long after both lovers had passed from this world, a testament to the power of two hearts finding each other against all odds in the wild, beautiful, unforgiving landscape of the American West. The ranch stood as a monument to their love. Every fence post and barn beam and carefully tended pasture, a reminder that sometimes the greatest journeys begin with the smallest acts of kindness, and sometimes the greatest love stories start with a simple question: will you stay? Fiona had stayed, and in staying, she had found not just a husband and a home, but a purpose and a family and a love that transcended time itself. And every year, on the anniversary of their wedding, the Sullivan family gathered at those two graves on the hill and told the story again, making sure that Logan and Fiona's love would never be forgotten, that their legacy would live on in every generation that followed. They had come from nothing and built everything. They had loved fiercely and completely. They had created a family and a home and a life worth living. And in the end, that was all anyone could hope for: to love and be loved, to build something that mattered, and to leave the world a little better than they found it. Logan and Fiona Sullivan had done all of that and more. Their love story, which began on a dusty street in Willits, California in 1878, became the foundation upon which an entire family was built, a foundation that would stand strong for generations to come. Proof that sometimes the most unexpected journeys lead to the most beautiful destinations.